If you asked me what college taught me, I wouldn't talk about 8 a.m. philosophy discussions or those nights of cold coffee in the 24/7 library. I talk about weight. The weight of unspoken things. The weight of standing in front of someone, knowing how much you want them, but still choosing to turn away. I was a junior at a public university in the Midwest. A sprawling campus with lots of maple trees, where fall was so beautiful it made you sad without knowing why. Everything here felt expansive. The lawns, the sky, the concrete paths connecting academic buildings. But emotions? Not so much. Emotions were usually crammed tight, hidden under oversized hoodies, headphones, and casual responses like "I'm good." Arlo transferred in during the spring semester last year. The first time I saw him was in writing seminar, a required class everyone pretended to like. Arlo sat 2 rows ahead of me, with light brown curly hair, a rumpled shirt collar like he'd just woken up and rushed to class. When he turned back to borrow a pen, our eyes met for less than a second, but it felt like someone had placed something heavy on my chest. Not the cheap love at first sight from movies, but a sense of familiarity, as if I'd lost him somewhere before I could remember if we'd ever met. Arlo spoke lightly, with a West Coast drawl that lingered at the end of sentences. He didn't laugh too loudly, but when he smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkled, making me turn away to pretend I was taking notes. I hated how I reacted like that. I hated how my body betrayed my reason just because of someone new. We didn't become close right away. Our relationship grew slowly, like something allowed but not encouraged. Started with small questions. What are you writing your essay on? Did you get this week's reading? Know any coffee shops that stay open late? Then came the library. Sessions sitting side by side, shoulders touching, neither of us saying anything but neither getting up first. Arlo had a habit of tapping his pen lightly on his lips when thinking. I had a habit of noticing little details like that and pretending I didn't. I come out about my sexuality freshman year. Not because I was brave, but because I was tired of pretending. Arlo was different. He never said it outright. But some things didn't need to be said to be clear. The way he looked at male couples walking by, the way he went quiet when girlfriend came up, the way he asked me very softly if I'd ever really loved someone. That time we were sitting on the steps outside the dorm. It was dark, the wind carrying the smell of damp grass and cold concrete. Once I replied, but we couldn't choose each other. Arlo was silent for a long time. Then he said, sounds heavy. I laughed. It is heavy. There were nights when Arlo came to my room. Not for anything shady. We'd lie on the floor, backs against the bed, watching old movies, shoulders touching, thighs touching. I could feel his breathing, steady and close enough to be scary. Sometimes I thought, if I just leaned my head a little, everything would change. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want Arlo. On the contrary, I wanted him so much I had to remind myself to breathe. I didn't because I understood one thing very clearly. Wanting and choosing don't always go together. And sometimes, not choosing each other doesn't come from a lack of feelings, but from the fear that once you choose, you can't go back to who you were. Arlo once told me, on a rare evening when he let himself be vulnerable, I'm scared if I cross that line, I'll lose everything. I didn't say that I was scared of the opposite, that if I didn't cross it, I'd lose him in a slower but more painful way. In this college, among thousands of students and endless options, we still stood still in front of each other. Not because we didn't love, but because we loved too much, to the point of not daring to choose. And that's when I started to understand. The weight of not choosing each other doesn't lie in the moment we turn away, but in all the days after when we have to live with that decision. Things started getting heavier toward the end of the semester. Not because of some big event. No caught kiss or failed confession. It was just, Arlo's presence in my life started taking up too much space. He appeared in moments where I used to need no one. When I made morning coffee, when I walked alone from the library back to the dorm near midnight, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind blank. Arlo started waiting for me after class. No heads up. No big deal. Just standing there, one earbud dangling, backpack slung over one shoulder. Like waiting for me was the most natural thing. Wanna grab food? He'd ask, voice casual enough that if I didn't know him, I think it was just polite small talk. We'd eat at a small burger joint off campus, where the neon lights flickered a bit, the table sticky with old fry oil, and the staff never asked too much. Arlo always ordered a chocolate milkshake. I always got black coffee, even though it didn't go with burgers at all. Once, when I was talking about an ex, a relationship that ended because neither of us was brave enough to love each other in the same place, Arlo interrupted. Do you regret it? I looked at him. Regret loving or not holding on? Regret not choosing? The question hung between us, heavy enough that I could hear the AC running behind the counter. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I was scared if I said it, it would apply to us both. I think I said slowly, regret isn't about not choosing, but about not being honest with yourself at the time. Arlo nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. They were like the eyes of someone standing before a half-open door, knowing what's inside is what they want, but also knowing that stepping in means no easy way back. I started noticing Arlo paid attention to me in small ways. He remembered I didn't like anyone touching my left wrist. Remembered I got headaches if I stayed up past 2 a.m. Remembered I hated crowded parties but liked sitting in the corner and observing. Those details weren't things everyone noticed. And that's why I couldn't pretend they didn't mean something. One night, Arlo came to my room later than usual. It was raining. Spring rain in the Midwest wasn't torrential, but persistent, like something that didn't want to end. His jacket was soaked. Hair stuck to his forehead. I handed him a towel, and in the moment our hands touched, I saw the hesitation in him, not the kind from not wanting but from wanting too much. We sat on the bed. No big lights on. Just the yellow glow from the desk lamp. Arlo was quiet for so long I started thinking he wouldn't say anything at all. Knox, he called my name very softly. If one day I chose you, would you choose back? My heart pounded so hard I was afraid he'd hear it. I wanted to say yes. Wanted it so much the word was on the tip of my tongue. But at the same time, I saw clearly everything that would come with it. The looks, the questions, Arlo's family, the irreversible change. And the biggest fear, that if we chose each other when one wasn't ready, that love would be crushed by its own weight. I don't want to be the reason you lose yourself, I said. Arlo smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. What if I lose you instead? That question followed me for days after. I started avoiding moments when it was just the two of us. Not because I wanted to be away from Arlo, but because I was afraid I wouldn't be strong enough to keep not choosing. Every time I saw him from afar, I saw it clearly. Some people can break you without even touching you. And the most painful thing was, Arlo didn't push me. He gave me space. It was that kindness that weighed on me the most. Because I knew, every day that passed without choosing each other was a day we were teaching ourselves how to lose each other slowly. My distance didn't make Arlo angry. It made him quiet, and quiet, it turned out, was scarier than any argument. Arlo still went to class, still sat in his usual spot, still took careful notes in his slightly slanted handwriting. But he didn't turn back to borrow a pen anymore. Didn't text to ask if I wanted dinner. No more evenings coming to my room just to sit and watch movies without saying a word. I convinced myself this was for the best. That I was doing the right thing. That sometimes, loving someone means not stepping into their life when you know you'll make everything more complicated. But reason couldn't stop the memories. I remembered how Arlo folded the corner of a page every time he found a sentence he liked. Remembered how he muttered to himself when stressed before a deadline. Remembered how he said my name, not rushed, not heavy, just Knox, but it sounded like a place he belonged. I hated myself for noticing those things too late. One afternoon, the professor announced that writing seminar would have a final group presentation. We were paired together. Randomly. At least on paper. Arlo looked at me when he heard his name with mine. No blame. No surprise. Just a straight, long look. Like he was asking me a question I'd been avoiding for weeks. We met at the library to work on it. No one was late. No unnecessary small talk. Everything between us became professionally cold. Arlo didn't look at me when he spoke. I didn't touch his hand when passing materials. The space between us was just enough for a backpack, but it felt like an ocean. Until he said, "Are you avoiding me?" I looked up. The question was asked so lightly that if I wasn't paying attention, I could have pretended not to hear. "I don't want to make things harder," I replied. Arlo smiled faintly. "Harder for who?" "For you. For me. For both." But I didn't say that. I didn't say that every time I looked at him, I had to remind myself that love isn't always the right choice. I didn't say I was afraid one day Arlo would look at me like someone who'd been left behind. "I just need you to be honest," Arlo said. "Not choosing is fine. But don't make me guess. There are moments in life where you know clearly. If you don't say it now, you'll never say it." "I chose not to choose," I said. My voice was low and steadier than I thought. "Because I thought it was the only way not to hurt you." Arlo looked at me. For the first time in weeks, his eyes broke. Not with anger, but with disappointment. "Do you know what hurts me the most?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not that you didn't choose me." Arlo took a deep breath. "But that you decided for me." That hit me hard, heavy and precise. I'd never thought of it that way. I thought I was protecting Arlo. But maybe I was just protecting my own fear and calling it by a nobler name. We finished the presentation in silence. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about all the times Arlo gave me chances to choose. Those half-questions, waiting looks, moments he stood outside my room without coming in unless I invited him. I thought about how many times in life I'd chosen not to, and always told myself it was maturity. But maybe, sometimes, maturity is just another way to say fear, wrapped up neatly. A week later, I saw Arlo with someone else. Not holding hands. Not intimate. Just laughing together, walking together. But that alone was enough for me to understand. He was trying to move on. And this time, without me. I stood from afar, hands in my coat pockets, and felt very clearly the weight of something I hadn't chosen, turning into real loss. And for the first time, I wondered, are there choices that, if not made in time, you no longer have the right to make later? I didn't ask Arlo about the person beside him. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I was afraid the answer would leave me no more excuses to hide. In college, every relationship seemed temporary. People came and went, switched seats, switched friend groups, even switched versions of themselves. I'd always believed Arlo would just be part of my chain of almosts. But seeing him smile with someone else, I realized, almost can leave real wounds too. The days after, I became restless. I focused on studying excessively, reading every line of material closely, taking more notes than needed, submitting early. People around me praised me for being on top of things. They didn't know I was trying to fill the void with discipline. One evening, I ran into Arlo in the dorm elevator. Just the two of us. No music, no chatter, just the steady hum of the machine. Arlo stood in the corner, hands in his coat pockets. I noticed he'd cut his hair shorter. A small change, but enough to make me feel like I was falling behind. "Have you been?" I asked, the question so familiar it sounded more like habit than real concern. Arlo nodded. "Fine." That answer closed everything. No more, no less. When the elevator stopped, he stepped out before me. No look back. I stood there a few seconds longer, wondering why a distance of just a few steps could feel so vast. That night, I sat alone in my room, opened my laptop to write an internship application email. But instead, I opened old notes, passages Arlo had commented on, sentences he'd underlined and written in the margin. This feels honest. I remembered how he read my writing, focused, serious, like every word deserved to be heard. I wondered, did Arlo ever feel like I read him that way too? A week later, I got a text from Arlo. Just one line. "You free to talk?" My heart raced. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Yeah." "Where?" We met in the courtyard behind the humanities building. A small grassy area, low traffic, where students sat to read on warm days. Arlo got there first. He was leaning against the wooden fence, looking toward the distant soccer field. "I'm not here to blame you," Arlo said as soon as I arrived. "I just don't want to carry unspoken things." I nodded. "Me neither." We sat down. The space between us just enough not to touch. Arlo took a deep breath. The person you saw the other day, he said, isn't my boyfriend. I didn't know why I felt lighter or heavier. I tried, Arlo continued. I thought if I stepped in another direction it might be easier. But I realized, I can't pretend what was between us never existed. I looked down at my hands. I'm sorry. Arlo shook his head. Don't apologize if you'd still choose the same. That made me look up. Some choices aren't fair, I said. And I chose the less risky one. For you, Arlo replied. His voice wasn't sharp, just tired. Not for me. We were silent. The wind rustled the young leaves lightly. I thought about all the times I'd called fear reason, called retreat maturity. I don't know how to choose without ruining everything, I said. I'm afraid if I choose you, one day you'll regret it. Arlo looked at me for a long time. Do you think I don't have the right to regret? That question choked me up. I don't need you to guarantee the future, Arlo continued. I just need you to be there while the present is happening. We didn't hug, didn't hold hands. But something between us was named not full love, but truth. And that truth was heavier than I imagined. When we stood to leave, Arlo said, if one day you're ready to choose, say so. But I won't stand still forever. I watched him go, and for the first time, I understood clearly. Not choosing is a choice too. And every choice has its cost. That night, I didn't open my laptop. I sat still on the bed, letting the regret wash over me. No avoiding, no rationalizing. Just feeling. Because I was starting to understand. The weight of not choosing each other doesn't just lie in what we lose, but in who we become after. After that talk, things didn't become clearer. On the contrary, it was like wiping clean a foggy mirror. Not to see an answer, but to force yourself to face yourself. I started realizing what I feared wasn't Arlo leaving. It was the version of me with him, a Knox less guarded, less in control, and thus more vulnerable. In college, you're taught how to build a future, resumes, networking, 5-year plans. No one teaches how to choose someone when that choice might shake everything else. I saw Arlo less, but every time I did, he seemed changed. Not loudly, not showy, just a new steadiness, like he'd stopped waiting. Arlo started joining a creative writing group outside class. I knew because he mentioned it in a class discussion, voice calm, eyes brighter than before. I listened with a heavy heart, realizing I used to be the first to read those passages of his. One evening, I saw Arlo's name in a department email. He'd been selected to read his work at the end of semester showcase. I read the email 3 times. Pride and loss mixed, neither yielding to the other. I went to the showcase, not because I thought Arlo needed me, but because I thought I needed to be there. The hall was small, wooden chairs packed close. Arlo stepped on stage, papers in hand, slightly shaking. When he started reading, his voice was low and clear. It was a story about 2 young men, meeting in a temporary place, loving in silence, and parting without a real goodbye. No names, no conclusion, just missed moments. I listened, not knowing if it was fiction or confession. When Arlo read the ending, sometimes the heaviest thing is not the love we carry, but the choice we never make. My throat tightened. He didn't look at me, but I knew it was speaking to me. After the reading, I didn't go congratulate him right away. I stood in the back, watching him surrounded by friends, faculty. He smiled, shook hands, answered questions. And Arlo very present, very belonging to himself. I waited until the crowd thinned. You did great, I said when I finally stood before him. Arlo smiled. Thanks for coming. No awkward silence. Nothing to explain. And that hurt because between us, not saying had become an unspoken agreement. I'm leaving for the summer, Arlo said, like he was talking about the weather. A writing program on the East Coast. I nodded. Congrats. I prepared myself for that news. But preparation didn't make it lighter. I saw a timeline emerge, a point after which everything would be different. Knox, Arlo called as I turned to leave. I want you to know, I'm not mad at you. I looked at him. I know, but I can't stay in that place forever, Arlo continued. The place where everything is just could be. I took a deep breath. I understand. And I really did. Not with reason, but with the heavy feeling in my chest. The feeling of someone who knows they've missed the moment. The last weeks of the semester flew by faster than I thought. Exams. Deadlines. Goodbyes. Arlo and I still talked, but like two people who'd agreed to walk parallel paths, close but not intersecting. The night before Arlo left, I stood outside his room for a long time. I thought about all the things I could say, the things I could choose, and I realized a bitter truth. We don't always fear losing others. Sometimes we fear losing our safe version of ourselves more. I didn't knock. The next morning, I saw Arlo wheeling his suitcase through the dorm lobby. He saw me. We looked at each other. A nod. A light smile. No promises. No long goodbyes. And when the automatic door closed behind him, I stood there, fists clenched, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to name it. I had loved Arlo. And I hadn't chosen. After Arlo left, the campus became strangely unfamiliar in a way I hadn't expected. Everything was still there. The stone paths, the late-night library, the burger joint with flickering neon. But their meaning wasn't the same. I walked through places that once had Arlo, with no one to remember them with. The memory didn't disappear. It just stood still, waiting for me to pass by to remind me that another version of my life had existed here. Summer came quickly and quietly. Friends went home. Dorms emptied. I stayed for a part-time job in the department. Days I organized files, answered emails. Nights I reread old passages, mine, Arlo's, and realized some sentences didn't need the writer present anymore, because they carried their traces. Arlo texted occasionally. Not often. Not regularly. Just fragments of his new life. A photo of gray East Coast sky. A quote from writing class. A short message. Thought of you today. I always replied. But I kept distance. Not because I'd stopped loving, but because I didn't know what right I had to ask for more. One night, Arlo called. No warning. I watched the screen vibrate, his name appearing, my heart pounding like the first time I heard his voice. Knox, Arlo said. His voice over the phone sounded farther, thinner. Do you believe some people enter your life just to teach you a lesson? I was silent. I don't like thinking of people as lessons. Arlo chuckled softly. Me neither. But sometimes, I wonder if we were just that to each other. I hope not, I said. And this time I wasn't lying. We talked for a long time about Arlo's new classes, my postgrad plans, the little things we used to share daily. No one mentioned choose or not choose. But we both knew it was there. Like a scar never named. When the call ended, I sat in the dark room for a long time, realizing distance doesn't make feelings vanish. It just clarifies what's left. Senior year began. I became more open, not to love, but to truth. I wrote more. Wrote about Arlo without naming him. Wrote about moments standing at a crossroads, believing you have infinite time, until you don't. One afternoon, the professor called me back after class. Your writing, he said, has a very quiet sadness. But it's honest. I nodded. I didn't say that sadness had a name. And that name was half a country away. At year's end, I got an email from Arlo. Not long. Not roundabout. I just got my first short story published. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled reading it. I replied immediately. I'm proud of you. And I really was, not the pride mixed with regret like before, but full joy from someone who'd learned to love without demanding possession. We still kept in touch occasionally. Not regularly. Not dependently. Like two lines that had once been very close, then continued on separate paths. Not parallel. Not intersecting. But not denying the past. Once, at a reading in the city I lived in, I stood up to read a passage of my own. The ending had the line, the weight of not choosing doesn't disappear. It just becomes part of the strength you carry forward. When I stepped down, someone came up and said they saw themselves in that story. I nodded. I knew the feeling. Because if there's anything I learned from Arlo, from us, it's that not every love needs a complete ending to matter. Some people enter your life not to stay, but to teach you how to stand firm when you have to choose yourself. Sometimes not choosing each other is a loss, but sometimes It's also the first step to becoming someone who can choose right when the real moment comes. And if one day I